Sup, guys? Finally, a winning night again last night, even though it was 1-1, because I put less money on the hockey underdog. There was more money on my other play, basically, to win the same amount. So the Detroit Pistons got there, covering the number. They were within the number for, I would say, a majority of the time, and that one got there. So finishing my night with a win. Nice. Hockey has been really not great recently. On a downswing there, that hockey game did not come through on Washington Capitals. I think it was. They were winning 2-0 early in that game. They were still winning 2-1 into the third period. So maybe it was a little bit closer than the final score looked, although they did get out statted in that game by quite a bit, although they were winning the majority of the game as well. That just sucks. But when your team is an underdog like that and they're winning the majority of the game, it's sort of indicative that it wasn't like the worst play. But we move on to today. We got a big slate of games to talk about today. I don't even know where to begin here. College basketball. It's a college basketball Saturday. It's a huge slate. I'll talk about a couple of these lines that look really suspect. And I would say, because I gut checked these against Ken Palm, and then I'm like, because there are lines that look so suspicious where you have these like really highly ranked teams against like teams that are not as highly ranked or whatever the case may be. And the line just looks so suspicious that it's like, well, the books are telling you something. And yeah, maybe they are, but then you double check it against Ken Palm, and Ken Palm's like, no, hold on a minute. So North Carolina Clemson, I believe, is one of those. Clemson's up from 1-3 as a home favorite going through the 3. I don't know if they're like injuries involved in any of these games or what's going on there. The line's gotten out of control on Clemson. 92% of the cash on Clemson, 68% of the tickets over on North Carolina. I mean, of course, it's North Carolina. They're the named team, and in this case, North Carolina is ranked 8. Clemson is ranked 16. I think Clemson is maybe slightly overrated as well. I mean, they've been just riding, like beating a lot of teams that aren't really that good, to be honest. Their one really good win was against Alabama earlier. So I think Clemson maybe a little bit overrated where they're sitting right now. Ken Palm has Clemson only winning this game by 1. So it gives you a little bit of pause, even though Clemson's off kind of an ugly looking loss to Miami, which I will talk about in a minute. And North Carolina is off a win over Pitt that looked better than it probably was. That game was a bit closer than that final score looks. It was closer late into that game, but Ken Palm is just kind of keeping me off of that. And then even more crazy is the Kentucky-Florida line, where Florida, not the Florida-Georgia line, Kentucky and Florida. Florida's up. They've flipped from a 1-point dog to a 3.5-point favorite now with 70% of the tickets and 59% of the cash on Kentucky. So again, you have North Carolina and Kentucky. Of course, they're going to be the public teams, and they are. And the cash discrepancy is significantly against them. So a lot of market indicators on both Clemson and Florida here. But Florida, a 3.5-point favorite. That just looks crazy. Kentucky ranked 6th in the country. Florida unranked. So that caught my eye immediately, and I'm like, I got to look at this and see, like, should I play Florida here? I look at Ken Palm, and the answer is kind of no, because Ken Palm has Kentucky as the better team and has them winning this game by 1. So it's like, what's up with this line? Again, I don't know if there are like injuries involved in this or what's going on here, but I would just have to stay away. I mean, Kentucky is not really in a bad spot. They're not off of anything big. They beat Illinois State like a week ago. Nobody cares about that. Florida played more recently and beaten Quinnipiac. That doesn't really matter either. So got to just stay away from those. And then a couple of the lines that I noticed that are, I think there are probably some other like lines that are probably a little bit suspect as well, that like that make you like make it like a professional bettor like think that it's like a trap line, but then you gut check it against Ken Palm, and Ken Palm is like telling you to just stay away from it, and that the power ratings like are in complete opposition to where the market is. So you just got to stay away from those. I think there are a couple others like that, but I forget what those actually might have been. I'll mention a couple of games where I think the line is a little bit suspect in a different way, where it's games that I actually almost played because Ken Palm is kind of right almost where the number actually is. And these are teams where I just think games where I just think the numbers where like the perception of these teams is just incorrect, basically. So Nebraska and Wisconsin is one of them. Wisconsin's up from a 6 to a 6.5 point favorite, going through the 6.5 with 51% of the cash on them, but tickets evenly split at 50. So not that much of a cash discrepancy there. And I think KenPom has Wisconsin winning this game by around 7 or actually 8. So there's a little bit of that discrepancy there. And I was close to wanting to play Wisconsin here. I think people just don't think that Wisconsin is as good as they actually are. I think they're rising from the dead a little bit here. Like, they were not that good in recent years, but they played pretty well this year. They had like a 10-point loss to Tennessee. That's nothing to scoff at. Lost to Providence on the road, whatever. Losing to Arizona. Arizona's really good. They beat Marquette and Michigan State. Those are both big, like, good wins. The Michigan State win is better than you think it was. Like, I thought Michigan State was in a good spot to take that game, and that was not even close to correct. But now Wisconsin's off a game that didn't look that great against Iowa. Nebraska looks really good. Nebraska just smashed Indiana, but Nebraska really hasn't played anybody. The best team they've played is Creighton, and Creighton wrecked them in Nebraska. And that was a game where the line looked kind of suspicious, and Nebraska maybe would get up for that game because they've been kind of the little brother to Creighton in Nebraska recently, but they just got smashed in that game. Nebraska really has not played anybody good, and beating Indiana looks good on the surface, but Indiana's really down this year. Indiana's still way overrated because their record is pretty good, but that doesn't look good. Nebraska's only really good win is against Michigan State, really. That was a nice win for them at home. Beating Kansas State. Kansas State's way down this year, too. Indiana, even worse, actually. Indiana really sucks. So I think that this is going to be kind of a reality check here. I think Wisconsin is far and away the better team here, and I just think the line is just a little bit short because of that. Nebraska has Purdue up next, but I don't think they're going to overlook Wisconsin, but it's just Wisconsin is the much better team here, so the way I look at that. And then kind of a similar situation going on in Ole Miss against Tennessee. Tennessee carries a lot of name recognition, though, and I guess so does Wisconsin. In this game, the market is actually against where I would tend to look in this game. I would tend to actually want to lay the huge number with Tennessee. Tennessee up from 11 to 11.5, but it looks like 71% of the cash on Ole Miss and 57% of tickets on Tennessee. So a big cash discrepancy on Ole Miss, even though the line has gone up a little bit on Tennessee. Tennessee is the way better team here, man. Ole Miss, they're an undefeated team still. That ends today. I don't have any question, any doubt that Tennessee is going to win this game against Ole Miss. I would be shocked if that isn't the case here. Ole Miss has been one of the most overrated teams in college basketball this season. They haven't played really anybody yet, and they're still undefeated. They're just thriving off of that really nice-looking undefeated record. KenPom has Tennessee in the top 10, and Mississippi down at number 82. KenPom has Tennessee winning this game by 14, and this game isn't really surrounded by anything that, well, Tennessee does have Mississippi State up next, but I think when you're playing a team that's undefeated and ranked in your conference, even if you know that you're better than they are, I think you're still going to show up and step it up. Tennessee's coming off a game against Norfolk State. No one cares about that. Mississippi beat Bryant in their last game. Also, nobody cares about that. So I think both teams are going to show up for this one. It's a big game, one of the bigger matchups on the board, ranking-wise, but I just think it's not going to be that entertaining of a game. Tennessee really is the way better team here. Power rated, way, way better. Mississippi, way overrated. And it's a spot where, like, the market is maybe as high as it's going to be on Mississippi, because if they get blown out in this game, the market value on Mississippi, you're not going to have as much value going against Mississippi as you would right now. I think Mississippi has hit their peak, and now they're running into maybe the best team they're going to face all year on their own floor. So, yeah, I would watch out for that, because the line is, people might look at that and say, well, even though Tennessee's really good, they might look at this and just say, how is Tennessee laying 11.5 against a team with a better record, an undefeated team that is ranked like they are? Yeah, it's just Mississippi is just that overrated right now. Let's get into the actual plays that I have in college basketball, which I actually forget what they even are. Those last two that I mentioned, I almost wanted to get on, by the way, the Tennessee and Wisconsin. I like those. And the KenPom number checks out, and the number is actually off from where KenPom has it. We're going to First game on the board that I'm on at noon, so I got to get this video out because that's in 2 hours. Louisville +9. Let's get on this one, man. Louisville. Why do I like this one? Louisville does suck, and I don't even know how much weight their name really carries at this point because they're so bad now. They haven't been good in like years. They're really bad again. They're probably the worst team in the ACC. KenPom has them ranked below 200, which is just totally insane. But this is a spot play. I mean, they're coming off two pretty ugly losses, even though they're two good teams, Kentucky and Virginia. Some of these losses, I mean, yeah, Kentucky, Virginia, Texas. I mean, some of these losses aren't to bad teams, really. So they haven't faced the easiest schedule, really. But KenPom's telling you how bad they really are. But Pitt isn't really that good either. And I think people might have a tendency to look at this and think, well, Pitt's got to be the better team, right? And maybe it looks too easy to lay the points. The line's down from Pitt 9.5 to 9 on the road. It's a lot of points for a team like Pitt to be laying on the road, to be honest. 94% of the tickets and 99% of the cash. I don't know if I buy that cash percentage there. I think what is certain is that Pittsburgh is going to be the public team here. Nobody's going to want anything to do with Louisville. They just got blown out again by Virginia, another game that doesn't look good. Louisville isn't very good, but this is going to be their ACC home opener, man. So I think if they're going to get up for a game, it's got to be something like this where they got blown out in their previous game. The only team that's actually behind them in the conference standings right now is Pitt, even though Pitt has the way better overall record. They're 0-3 in the ACC right now, and Louisville's 0-2. So I think Louisville, like, this got to be a game where Louisville might actually show up focused. Conference home opener. I think it's their conference home opener, right? Yeah, because they played Virginia Tech on the road and Virginia on the road so far in the ACC. So it is. Pitt, they're in a sandwich spot, man. This is why I don't like Pitt. So Louisville, yeah, they're in maybe a bounce back spot because they're coming off a game where they got blown out again against Virginia. And this is like maybe the one like winnable game in the ACC for Louisville here. The two bottom teams in the ACC right now, even though KenPom has Pitt ranked way, way higher than Louisville. They have Pitt only winning this game by 8, so there is that. So it's less than the 9 there. Neither of these teams are very good. Pitt just played a tough game against North Carolina, man, on their home floor. I think that was Pitt's ACC opener. Pretty tough game. The game was closer than the final score looks. Pitt was within single digits in that game late into the second half there, and then eventually just kind of fell apart and succumbed near the end there, but they were still within like 7 with like 4 minutes left. They were really close for a lot of that game, hanging with North Carolina. Now they go to Louisville, even though, yeah, Pitt still needs an ACC win, but they're facing the worst team in the ACC, which by far actually the worst team in the ACC, and they have Duke up next. So I think it's a sandwich spot for Pitt, even though they do not have a win yet in the ACC. When you played a tough game against North Carolina like that, and then you have Duke up next in 3 days, and you have to go on the road to Louisville, and you haven't played that many road games this year. Pitt's only played 2 road games this year, and one of them they beat West Virginia, but West Virginia is a total mess right now with a lot of turnover, a lot of injuries there. West Virginia, really a disaster right now. And the other game they lost at Syracuse, which was a game I thought Pitt was in a good spot to actually play well in that game, and they still didn't even do it, and they lost. I think they made a pretty sizable comeback in that game and still lost. So they played 2 like pretty big effort games in a row, really. And they have Duke up next in 3 days. And they have Duke and then a revenge game against Syracuse and then Duke again. So they might not totally be focused on Louisville here because Louisville sucks so bad. So I'm taking the boatload of points here with Louisville +9. I think it's a sandwich spot for Pitt. So that's that. Next game that I'm on in college basketball, Wake Forest -4. This is kind of a toad special here, really. Wake Forest, they're sitting at 4. Looks like it's going up through the 4 with juice. I like this one, man, because Miami's a public road underdog here. It looks like there's reverse line movement on Wake Forest. Miami has 79% of the tickets and 58% of the cash. They have the majority of the tickets and the cash, but way less of the cash than the tickets. So they're the public team. The cash discrepancy is on Wake Forest as a home favorite. Nobody's wanting Wake Forest here, and the line is reverse line moving against it a little bit. Miami is off a big win, man. They just beat Clemson, a ranked team, even though I think Clemson's a little bit overrated. They are still good. That's a big win still for Miami. Now Miami's going on the road to Wake Forest, who Wake Forest flying a little bit under the radar, man. Ken Pom, I think, has these two teams ranked pretty close to each other. Wake Forest just beat BC on the road. It wasn't really the easiest game, really. They beat BC. Nobody really cares about beating BC anyway. Wake Forest, this is not their conference home opener because they did already win a home conference game against Virginia Tech. But they don't really have anything on the horizon. They have Florida State up next. I think they're going to be focused on Miami, man. This is the team that – did Miami win the ACC last year or did Duke? I think Duke won the ACC, but Miami made it the furthest in the tournament. Of course, Miami was a Final Four team last year. And I think Miami's just – they're riding a lot on their name recognition, man. Even though they're also 2-0 in conference right now, 11-2 overall. They're sitting atop the ACC again here. I think they're thriving on what they did last year, their name recognition. People saw that Final Four run where they overperformed to get to that Final Four. I mean, they are a good team, a well-coached team under Larinaga, who I assume is still there. He's not too old, right? I mean, he is too old, but he's still there as far as I know. But Miami's just thriving on that name recognition, man, and they don't really have any like impressive wins yet this year. I mean, they had a tough game against Utah that they lost. You can't really blame them for losing to Utah. Really, Utah's pretty good. And then really other than that, they don't really have that much. They beat Florida. That's probably their biggest win, beating Florida. Florida's a little bit underrated this year. Not a bad team, but Miami, man, again, they're just thriving off of that name recognition and what they did last year. They just, I'm looking at Wake Forest here. Excuse me. People are going to be looking. Oh man, I apologize. Wake Forest only impressive or somewhat impressive win is to Florida, and they played Utah close. I'm sorry, that was Wake Forest. So Wake Forest, I mean, people are going to look at their schedule and not really be impressed by it. Miami, on the other hand, their schedule I don't think is that impressive either, though. Like their biggest game against Kentucky, they lost that game pretty badly. They beat Kansas State, which really doesn't look very good right now. Kansas State's not very good. They got crushed by Colorado. That was kind of a reality check game there. So what I was saying is still true that I think Miami's not as good as they were last year. I think they overperformed last year too, and in the tournament looked better than they actually were. I think they're overrated. I don't think they're really as good as people think they are. They just had that big win against Clemson, which looks good because it's a ranked team. It's a good win, but Clemson's a little bit overrated. Clemson, a good team, but not as good as the 16th ranked team. They're coming off that game, and now they have to go to Wake Forest. And their only other road game this year, they got blasted by Kentucky, Miami. So going on the road is unfamiliar for them so far this year. Doesn't look very good for them. Wake Forest, like I said, they just beat Boston College. Who cares? This is kind of a ranking discrepancy type of game here, and I think it's a letdown spot for Miami. A big win over Clemson, which is kind of a little bit of a statement game. Like, we're still here. We're still good. Ken Pom has Wake Forest ranked slightly higher than Miami and has Wake Forest winning this game by 4, so I do like that as well. I laid the 4 with Wake Forest. I think we're going against the public here. We're going against the perception. The perception is way too high on Miami here. In Wake Forest, nobody cares about them. They're flying under the radar. I like Wake Forest to catch Miami here. Miami, not a very impressive team, really. Still overrated, just like I thought they were last year. Let down spot a bit off of the win over a ranked team, their first win over a ranked team this year, I believe. So kind of like a statement game, like maybe almost like a legitimizer type of game where Miami beat Clemson. Now they're going into Wake Forest. It's a bigger game for Wake Forest, man. You got Miami, who made the Final Four last year, coming into your house. I think Wake's going to step it up for this one. I like Wake. I'm doing it. I am on Wake. I will mention really quickly, I do lean to Rice. I don't want this video to go that long, but I lean to Rice as well. Rice is up from 8 to 8.5. I think Ken Pom has this game right around 8 against UTSA. Rice just got blown out by Tulane, even though Tulane's one of the better teams I think they're in the same conference, right? In the American Athletic. Excuse me. So Tulane's not that bad, but Rice got absolutely destroyed by them by like 25 points. So that's really a game that you're going to kind of want to bounce back from, even though it's kind of a big opponent in Tulane there. And UTSA, they just played a much tougher game against UAB. UAB is a team that kind of uglies up games to some extent and plays pretty tough. And they only lost that game by 2, was like 6.5 point favorites. So UTSA played a tougher game there, and they have Memphis up next, so it might be a sandwich spot for UTSA. Memphis on the horizon there in 4 days. Just came off a tough game against UAB, who's also a pretty good team. You have to go to Rice in between those, and Rice is off of a bad blowout loss. That's a tough spot for UTSA. And people are going to look at this and say these teams have basically the same record. They do have the same record. And Rice is laying 8.5 points. Like, what's up with that? That looks ridiculous. Rice is actually the better team than UTSA fairly significantly as well. And UTSA, like I said, are in a bad spot, a sandwich spot. So I do lean to Rice there. And KenPom has that one at 8. So my lean would be to Rice in that one. I'll just throw that out there because that's a game that I find interesting. Another game where the line looks suspicious is Baylor, Oklahoma State. Baylor, the ranked team against an unranked Oklahoma State. Baylor laying 5. They have 95% of the cash, but 85% of the tickets. So it looks like the cash discrepancy is on Baylor, even though it looks almost too easy to take Baylor as well. Why are they only laying 5 against Oklahoma State? Baylor, the ranked team, but it looks like they have the cash discrepancy. Maybe the numbers guys are coming in, having something to say here, even though I think Baylor is a little bit overrated. KenPom still has them in the top 20. And they still have them winning this game by 7, mostly because they have Oklahoma State ranked very poorly. Oklahoma State has 0 impressive wins this year, not even close to an impressive win. Oklahoma State really not impressive, so maybe thriving a little bit just on the fact that they're a Big 12 team and they have a little bit of name recognition as Oklahoma State. So I actually think this line might be a little bit short there, even though it looks like a trap and it looks maybe too easy to take Baylor. I would be really careful with that one because KenPom has Oklahoma State ranked a lot lower than what you might think. So Baylor may be slightly overrated, but somehow Oklahoma State actually might be even more overrated. So I am not going to be touching that game. Staying away. The other 2 games I'm on, let's get to these quickly here. Colorado, we're getting into the night games here. -3, Colorado. I kind of like this one. I think it's a spot where Colorado's going to bounce back and Arizona State's in a letdown spot. As much of a big game as this is against Colorado, it's a decently big game, but Colorado's not ranked anymore. Colorado's up from 2.5 to 3 on the road. Does that look a little bit suspicious that Colorado is laying points on the road to an Arizona State team that just beat Utah? Maybe. Colorado does still have the better record, though, so I don't know. In a way, does it look too easy to take Colorado? I don't know. I'm laying the 3 with Colorado, though. KenPom, I think, has this line at either 3 or 4. Let me see what they got. They got Colorado ranked a lot higher than Arizona State, not even close. So they have Arizona State being overrated for the most part here. So that's kind of what's going on here. Colorado, KenPom has 32 and has Arizona State 103 and has Colorado winning this game by 5. So even though Arizona State probably does realize it's a big game against Colorado, how much left are you going to have in the tank when you just had maybe an even bigger game against Utah, where Utah was favored by 5.5? You just beat Utah by 12 points, man. That was a big game. That's kind of a statement game for Arizona State there. They're undefeated in conference now because they beat Utah. They're 3-0 now. They actually beat they beat Stanford. Yeah, so I guess they won on the road at Stanford, which actually was an upset win as well. So 2 of those 3 wins are upset win. I think all 3 of them actually are, because Cal was actually favored against them too. So Arizona State, 3 straight upset wins. It's like, is that really going to continue? They have to go to Washington next, which maybe not as big a game as Colorado, but Washington does, I don't know, have some name recognition. But Colorado, yeah, it's a big game, but I think Arizona, they're in a letdown spot. They just beat Utah by double digits as like 6.5-point underdogs. Man, you've won 3 straight games as an underdog. Is it a case where the market just hasn't caught up to Arizona State yet? I'm not so sure. I think Arizona State was bad last year too, and they somehow made the tournament and won. Did they win or no? Did they win or did they lose? I guess they lost. No, they lost to TCU, I guess, in the first 4 in kind of a close game or whatever. Yeah, so Arizona State, I think, was overrated and shouldn't have even made the tournament last year. I think they're a bit overrated right now, too, off of those wins that they just had. They're in a letdown spot, man. Colorado might be now flying a little bit under the radar because they just got reality checked by Arizona. They went to Arizona. So, yeah, this is going to be their second game, and the Arizona leg is tough, kind of, but that was only their second road game of the year, and they did play better against Colorado State in their first road game. In that big Colorado rivalry game, but they just lost by 47 points to Arizona, man. So people are going to look at that and think, I mean, Arizona's a really good team, but people are going to look at that and think, Colorado isn't any good at all because they just got crushed. But I don't think that that's the case. I mean, Florida did crush Miami, although I just talked about how overrated Miami is. I think Colorado's not as good as they looked in absolutely destroying Miami, but they're not as bad as they looked in getting absolutely wrecked by Arizona either. So is that going to be like one of those games where they get like hung over because it sends them crashing down to earth, or are they going to be angry because it was such a bad looking loss? I kind of tend to think the latter. Colorado is a lot better than Arizona State here, so I like it. Arizona State's going to let down off of 3 straight upsets. I don't know if they're going to have that much left in the tank to pull off a 4th straight upset. Colorado's off a really ugly looking, embarrassing loss against Arizona. So I like Colorado there, laying the 3 with Colorado. And on the other side of that game, by the way, Arizona, because they looked so good in crushing Colorado, and Utah just lost to Arizona State, I think Utah might have something to say about those games there, and Utah might put up a good performance at Arizona. Utah are double-digit underdogs at Arizona, and I kind of lean to Utah in the game against Arizona there because Arizona looked almost too good, winning by 47 against Colorado. Even though KenPom does have Arizona winning by 12 in that one, I think the line's somewhere around 11.5 maybe. Utah looked pretty bad, and that Arizona blowout win was only 2 days ago. Utah looked pretty bad in that loss to Arizona State, so it's kind of the way I look at that. And both of those games were 2 days ago, by the way, so not that much turnaround time for Arizona State in the Colorado game that I'm on. Arizona State just pulled off that upset 2 days ago. They don't have that much time to get ready for Colorado here. And Colorado did also play 2 days ago, but they got blown out, and that game was kind of over earlier than the buzzer there. So they might have already maybe have packed it in and didn't like put in as much of an effort as Arizona State had to. So I like Colorado. And then finally, I'm on Portland minus 9.5 in this late game here. It looks like the game is up to 10 in most places. It's actually 10.5 at some places now. So I would try to get on this at 9.5 or maybe 10 or whatever, because I don't know if this line's going to keep going up. I don't even see percentages on this. I like Portland here against Pacific. Nobody's going to really be paying attention to this game, but recreational bettors who do might come in and wonder, like, what is up with this line here? Like, who is Portland to be laying this many points? Portland sucks. Yeah, they do, but they don't suck as much as Pacific. People are going to look at this and say, well, Portland has only one fewer loss than Pacific, so they're barely better than Pacific, right? And they've lost 4 games in a row, and they've lost 6 of their last 7. Like, who is Portland? They suck. Yeah, I mean, kind of. They do. A couple of those losses were excusable against Grand Canyon, who's really good. UMass isn't too bad this year. Portland hasn't played, though, since before the Christmas break. Now, their last game was they played in that Hawaii tournament. They were out there up through Christmas Eve, and they haven't played since then. So they had the holidays, and then since then they've just been kind of waiting around, and they got this game against Pacific. So even though they have St. Mary's and San Francisco up next, this is going to be their conference home opener, man, and they've had a lot of time off, so I don't think they're going to be looking ahead to St. Mary's. They had all that time off to try to break this 4-game loss streak that they've had. They've been playing really poorly, and when you've been playing poorly and you come out of a huge break like that, that break tends to help you like refocus. And now it's your conference home opener, man. I think it's going to be a decent spot for Portland to show up here, whereas Pacific, they just had a really tough game, man. Pacific just played 2 days ago, and they played into overtime in their conference home opener against San Francisco, who might be the best team in the WCC this year. Gonzaga fans, don't at me. San Francisco might actually be better than Gonzaga this year. I don't know. I think it's close at least. San Francisco, really good team. Portland Pacific, was a big underdog there. 19.5-point underdogs. And Pacific was winning that game late into the game, and they had many chances to win that game. They let the lead go away. They lost the lead. It went into overtime, and they finally wound up falling just short to San Francisco. I don't know if Pacific's going to have much left in the tank after that, man. That was a big, big game for them. They stepped it up. Played a huge game in their conference home opener on their own floor. Huge game for Pacific as almost 20-point underdogs. They came close to almost pulling off the upset against San Francisco. Huge game. Now they have to go out on the road again. I think it's a tough spot for them, man. You got to face a Portland team that has been struggling and has had a ton of time off, and they've just been sitting around waiting for you and probably preparing something. And the line just looks ridiculous. It looks so crazy high, man. I took it at 9.5, and like I said, it's up to 10.5 now. maybe at 10, I would still maybe take a shot at it. Ken Baum has this number at 10. So Ken Baum has Pacific 340th in the country. So he has them in like the bottom, like 25 or whatever in the entire country. And he has Portland ranked almost 100 ranking spots higher than Pacific. So Portland is the better team. They play the tougher schedule. I like Portland here. It's a bad spot for Pacific on top of that, on top of the fact that the line might look a little bit suspicious with Portland laying this many points. I like Portland. I think they probably win this game. I think got to win this game by double digits, man. It's a good spot for them to do it. Really tough spot for Pacific. I don't know if they're going to have that much left after what they did a couple nights ago against San Francisco. I don't know if they're going to be able to bounce back. I'm on Portland. Going to the NBA, I'm on one game, even though the market looks like it's against me in the NBA. Only 4 games in the NBA, and a lot of these teams played yesterday as well. So some crazy stuff going on. The market's going against me here, man. I'm on the Washington Wizards. I'm taking a lot of points as a home underdog here on the Wizards. I don't know why the market's against me here. It's gone up from Knicks 8 to 9, 52% of the tickets on the Knicks, but 79% of the cash. I don't get it. I don't understand why that's the case. I like the Wizards in the spot that they're in here. Both of these teams played last night, I believe. Excuse me, even though the Knicks have the cash discrepancy and they are obviously the better team, the Knicks just went into Philadelphia last night and beat Philadelphia by 36 points. Like, come on, man. Like, are the Knicks really gonna, like, how could you be not, like, really, like, high and mighty after that game, man? They've won 2 in a row now, and that's what they did last night, going into Philadelphia as, like, 6-point underdogs. Philadelphia, even though they don't have James Harden anymore, I don't know if maybe Philadelphia had some guys out in that game. I'm not really even sure. Probably not, because Philadelphia was favored by a decent amount. Philadelphia is right at, like, ahead of you in the standings, basically in your division. You go into their house and you just absolutely smack them by 36 points. Like, are you really going to be totally focused on the Washington Wizards in your next game? Even though I'd like this better if the Knicks had a bigger game up next, which they don't. They have Portland, but still, man, this is a game where they're playing a third game in 4 days, all in different cities. It's also a fourth game in 6, going back to the first where they beat Minnesota at home. They beat the T-Wolves, even though it was a return home for a road trip. They did not suffer the distraction angle there. They beat the T-Wolves. Then they kept it up again and beat Chicago, staying at home. Then they went on the road yesterday, absolutely crushed Philadelphia, embarrassed them. Stock has got to be too high on the Knicks now after that, man. You beat Philadelphia, one of your divisional foes and one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference by that much in their own house. Come on, man. Are you really going to be focused on Washington? Washington, yeah, they played yesterday too. They're also playing a third game in 4 days, but it is not a 4th and 6. They had 2 days off before they played, and they played both of those games at Cleveland. So they haven't really been traveling much. They didn't really go anywhere. They only went to Cleveland and played 2 games against Cleveland. So even though it is a back-to-back, they got blown out in both of those games. They lost by 39, and then they did not zigzag it in the last game last night. They got blown out again by 24. Even though Washington has Oklahoma City up next, I don't think you can afford to be unfocused at all when you're Washington. You want to win at some point, man. I think you're going to be focused here. You're coming off a couple of really, really hideous blowout losses here. Now you got the Knicks who are riding high off of playing Philadelphia. Yeah, off of beating Philadelphia in a blowout. I like this. Yeah, I like Washington. I'm taking them at +9. I don't know if maybe the line will even creep up a little bit further. I'm not sure, but I like it, even though the market looks like it's going against me. There's that big cash discrepancy on the Knicks. I don't really understand it. I don't understand why. I think it's a bad spot for the Knicks. Washington in like an embarrassed spot, wanting to do something to bounce back here from some really horrendous looking losses. The Knicks flying high off of one of their most impressive wins of the season, really. So I'm on Washington. I'm on the Wizards, taking one of the ugliest teams in the NBA yet again, like I did with Detroit last night. We're getting a ton of points at home. Let's do it. Let's take the Wizards. The Wiz. I am the Wiz. Let's take the Wiz. And then in the NHL, I got 2 plays here. Some interesting games in the NHL. I think Florida-Colorado is going to be a really good game, man. Colorado, I'm not playing this one, but Colorado's down from -133 to -120 on the money line. So it looks like the number's actually going towards Florida, but 79% of the cash on Colorado and 73% of the tickets on Colorado. This is going to be, that's an interesting one, man. Florida, They're coming off yet another big win. They beat the Golden Knights for a second straight time, another huge win. Now they're having to go into elevation. It might be tough to keep up that amount of effort, man, even though it is a big game against Colorado. Colorado's coming off a big game of their own where they beat Dallas, who's right behind them in their division. That was a big game for Colorado, too. So, yeah, this is a tough one to read, man. Really tough one to read. And Colorado's off 2 straight overtime games. Both teams are in spots where I'd want to look to go against them. So we'll kind of see what happens in there. I don't know. That's going to be an interesting one. What are the games I'm actually on? Game 1, even though it looks like the market is going against me again, I don't know if I love this one, but I'm jumping on it. I am on the Buffalo Sabres plus 146. I'm on 2 moneyline underdogs here. So if one of the 2 of them wins outright, I think we're in good shape here. So that's really what you want here, man. When you're taking underdogs that are in like the plus 140, whatever range, you don't even need to hit 50% on those. You just probably need to get about like 48 and you'll be like profiting. So let's hope we go 50-50 on these. Buffalo is at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's up from minus 167 to minus 175 on the money line. I don't understand why that's the case. The money seems to be driving it up on Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's certainly going to be the public team. 92% of the tickets on them, 98% of the cash. So they're the very public team. So I think they're in a spot where we can fade them, go against the public team here in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's record is looking better and better as they've been doing really well recently. What did they do last? They beat the Boston Bruins in a really insane game, a crazy game where the Penguins were beating them 5-2 at one point in Boston. And then and this was 2 days ago. And then Boston tied the game up, unfortunately for my Bruins. The Bruins tied it all the way up, tied it on a shorthanded goal, the tie to 5, and then still wound up losing right near the end on a final goal for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh blew the 3-goal lead late in the game and then still wound up winning the game 3-2. That is a tough game for Pittsburgh, man. A huge win for them. And they do have their rival, Philadelphia, up next, a division rivalry, in-state rivalry in Philadelphia coming up next 2 days from now. So when you're off a huge win over Boston that went like that and you have Philadelphia up next, are you going to be totally focused on Buffalo? I'm not so sure about that. Buffalo not playing well, one of the worst teams in hockey, really, but they've made me some money this year. So I've taken them in some spots, and including a couple days ago, I took Buffalo, and they won as a favorite. So I've taken them mostly as an underdog, and they've been pretty good to me. And Pittsburgh, after Philadelphia, has Vancouver and Carolina. They do have Seattle after that, but who cares? Vancouver and Carolina, a couple more big games for Pittsburgh up there on the horizon. So this is a little bit crazy there on Pittsburgh. Yeah, this spot is really not good for Pittsburgh there. You can actually get 150 with Buffalo now. So maybe that is whatever the line is going to be on Buffalo there. We'll grab Buffalo as the underdog here. Buffalo, on the other hand, yeah, they're coming off a win themselves, but they beat the Canadians, man. Canadians were in a bad spot, of course, which might detract a little bit from what Buffalo just did there. And it is their 3rd straight road game, but they had a lot of time off between the first 2. They went into Ottawa and lost badly. And this is why I was on Buffalo in their prior game. They had a lot of time off. Montreal was in a terrible spot. Buffalo went in, beat them. Didn't have to put in a huge effort there to beat Montreal. So I kind of like that aspect of it. Pittsburgh had a much bigger, like, barn burner of a game 2 days ago than Buffalo did. Buffalo kind of had an easy win against a team that's not very good. Buffalo doesn't really have anything up on the horizon either. I think they're going to want to win the rubber match on the road trip here and go 2-1. They don't want to have a losing road trip here. So I think that'll motivate them. They know Pittsburgh's been playing well. I think they'll be focused on a Pittsburgh team that's been playing pretty well here. Buffalo, I think they'll show up for this one. And then the starting goalies, I don't really know who we're going to have in net here for them. It looks like none of this is confirmed. It looks like it's going to be Luukkonen for Buffalo. He hasn't played in the last 2, so it looks like we might get the second string goalie for both these. I don't even know who the second string goalie actually is for Buffalo. They've been going with Luukkonen and Levi, and they've kind of been switching off with both of them. So I don't even know which one of them you consider to be their starter, really. They both have kind of similar stats, too. So I don't know. Like, neither of them have great stats, to be honest. And then on the Pittsburgh side, it looks like we're going to have Jarry in net. Is that his name? So I think he's actually the lesser of the 2 goalies for Pittsburgh there. So might be a little bit of an extra edge there for Pittsburgh there because Nedeljkovic has played the last 3 games for Pittsburgh. He's been really good. Jarry, his stats, actually his stats are around the same too, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Pittsburgh has been winning a lot more of their games with Nedeljkovic in there, though, so I don't know. So I guess the goaltender matchup doesn't really matter that significantly in this game, really. So I guess it doesn't totally matter, but Pittsburgh's been doing fairly well with Nedeljkovic in net there recently, and him being their goalie in a lot of those games recently. So who knows? And neither of those goalies are confirmed yet either, but I just like the spot, so that's what I'm going to do there. And then the final game that I'm on, who am I on? I'm on the Nashville Predators. Dallas, this line looks like it's going towards me. It's crashing from -175 to -158. I got in on this already before because this one, even though the public is on Dallas, I kind of saw the line moving in the opposite direction than the one was in the Buffalo game. So I was like, I got to get on this now. You can still get this at like +145 or whatever, which I think is actually what I got as well. +145 on the Nashville Predators. That is what I'm on. The line's going down, though, man. It's going down. You're going to want to get on it if you like Nashville. Down from -175 to -158 on Dallas here. I don't really see the market percentages yet. 91% of the tickets on Dallas. It says 100% of the tickets on cash, on Dallas. I don't think that's accurate. Dallas is going to be public, though. Dallas, even though they're on a losing streak, this is a tough spot for Dallas, man, because they're coming off an overtime loss to Colorado where they put in a huge effort 2 days ago, big time effort for Dallas there against Colorado. They're coming off that. I think it might be a bit of a hangover spot. They get Nashville here, and then they get Minnesota up next. I don't know which one of those games they might be focused more on, really. I mean, Nashville is closer to them in the standings, really, in the division. But for some reason, it seems like Minnesota carries more like name recognition, though, because they were in the playoffs last year and whatever. I don't know. But I just think it's a hangover spot for Dallas coming off that tough overtime game against Colorado, whereas Nashville, they've entered a really bad stretch. They were hot for a little while, and now they've lost 4 of their last 6 games, although they won 2 prior to losing their last game. They lost pretty badly to Calgary to finish a 2-game homestand there. That's not good at all. You lost 6-3 to Calgary. I like this spot better for Nashville because they lost badly at home, and now they get to go out on the road. So when you lose badly at home, going out on the road is like a better spot for you to like refocus. You get to put those home distractions aside, not think about that ugly loss anymore. Go on the road. And what's better to focus you than playing a team that's right above you in the standings in Dallas? I think Nashville's going to be focused on Dallas, whereas Dallas is coming off a game where they played the team that's just ahead of them in the standings, played them into overtime, just barely lost that close game against Colorado. So that was a bigger game for Dallas. Now this game is a bigger game for Nashville, I would say, coming into Dallas, or the roles kind of reverse a little bit here. So I like it. I like Nashville there. Saturday, big slate, man. Let's get through. We'll do the rundown real quickly here. College basketball, Louisville +9, Wake Forest -4, Colorado -3, Portland -9.5. Those are the 4 college basketball games in the NHL. Buffalo +146, Buffalo Sabres +146, Nashville Predators +145. Both of those on the money line. And in NBA, Washington Wizards +9. So those are all the plays that I have today. And very quickly, NFL, I don't have plays on these games. I mentioned these games on my other, my big NFL video. I talked about both of these games. Games have big playoff implications, man. And my feelings have not changed on these. The Steelers are still sitting at about a 3-point favorite, with the market still indicating on the Steelers. The Ravens have 56% of the tickets and 53% of the cash on them. So the Ravens obviously are not playing their starters. They're locked into the 1 seed, so they don't have as much to play for, even though they did lose to the Steelers earlier this year. And there is a matter of pride here, but even so, I think they're going to be focused more on the playoffs at this point, and that big, huge win that they're just coming off of, focusing on making sure they're ready for the playoffs. Pittsburgh in a total must win, but I don't know. The pressure is going to be on Pittsburgh as well here. So they have to win this game, and they need help, but I think it's a better spot for the Steelers here. They're the team that has way more motivation here at the very least, even though they're going to have way more pressure on them as well. So, and they're the team that's starting all their starters. And I still lean to the Texans in the other game, unfortunately, against my Colts. They're now up to a 2-point favorite, still with 84% of the tickets, or 84% of the cash on them, and 76% of the tickets. So even though Houston's public, they do still have the cash discrepancy, and the number's still going up on Houston, even though I think the Colts do have the experience edge against them. The line is just telling you that Houston's actually the better team here, man, even though they're going to be public because of their high-flying offense, too. I don't know. I don't know about that one, but enjoy all the games, man. Got to end the video. Peace.